So Anthony and Leo in the chat both asked if you always sidechain your delays.
Sidechain my delays.
I'm imagining that what they're asking is, do you sidechain them off of the lead vocal so that the lead vocal ducks them or something like that?
All right. I have this one pet peeve about delays when I receive sessions to mix, and this maybe will kind of illustrate it. If there's anybody out there and you do your delays like this, please do it another way or stop and let me tell you a better way. I receive sessions every once in a while, and say you have, here, I'll bring up a delay here, this quarter note, and say it's at 21, and the level will be there. And then there's another track that's controlling the mute of that send. So for that delay to happen, one, the fader of the level needs to be up and the mute needs to be activated. So it's like two parameters that are now controlling one aspect of it. So when I add delays, I'm using the same aux sends, but I'm putting everything at completely nothing, all the way down there. And whenever I want the delay, then I'll just draw the level automation and just rise it up wherever I want it. And I have full control, because the thing with the mute thing is, if you want one delay a different volume than the other, then you're having to automate the volume anyway. So why not just automate the volume and get the whole mute thing like out of the equation and just make it easier?
Interesting. I think a benefit to that is that depending on how your mute opens, you might get a snap or a pop as well.
Oh,
whereas
that's the other thing.
Yeah, if you do a volume fader, it's never gonna snap because it's always gonna be slightly, right.
Yeah.
And to me,
rising.
it's always doing double the work, and it locks it. Like when you can do a simple fader move, and you're like, oh, now I got to go to a whole nother parameter and fix that so I can do it too.
Can I be guilty for a second? Like I totally do that mute thing where I just set the level globally and I mute, and that's a bummer. But I like it because I have my control surface and then I like play the mutes. You know what I mean? I'm like throw.
From the programming aspect, it allowed you to program it.
Yes, I could do it with my hand, but I guess
Like tactile response.
Yeah, but you're right. I should do that, and then I should just copy and paste the automation to the volume or something like that, right? And just so that way I can do it the way you're asking for. I think, I mean, it makes perfect sense.
Because we literally, well, I don't know if everybody does it, but I have to reconstruct it into the form of just the volume. Like, all right, you have your volume at -18, and then you're unmuting it. So it's like, I'll delete all that, I'll bring the whole level down to nothing, and then I'll just raise that part to -18, and I can shape it, I can do whatever I need to. I compress them, I EQ those returns. I don't sidechain it, because if he's asking in terms of when the lead vocal's not there, the delays are more present, and then when the vocal gets there, they kind of like duck away. I could do that. I guess that's just not my style, and I rather just tell it when to happen and how to happen, opposed to like, okay, you're allowed to happen when I'm not doing this, if that makes sense.
Something else that I do, and I don't know if you do this the same thing, is that I like to use like an LA3 on a delay, and then basically what I do is say, okay, since it's a feedback loop for delays, right? So it's like the first one's gonna be loud,
right.
Second one's gonna be whatever your feedback is. So it might be like 50% of the first one. So what I'll do a lot of times is put a compressor on the delay so that it knocks the first one down closer to the level of the second echo.
Right.
Do that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always compressing and EQing the reverbs different ways. Sometimes you'll even put a flanger on it, a doubler on it.
But are you thinking in that same manner of like changing the volume of each return?
With compressing returns like that, my mind frame is more in, I know how to use a compressor to make something lock into a certain pocket of space and time to where it's like, I know you need to fit in this piece of the puzzle, and I know how to use the compressor to get it there, but not necessarily thinking like, all right, I want the first one to like come down in volume or more even out. I mean, sometimes, but it's more like, all right, let's make these delays more present. Let's bring this up.
It sounds like we have the same concept we're describing it in different ways. Like you aren't thinking in the same way as
from
me,
a different approach.
Yeah, but it's like the same idea because you're trying to force the dynamic range down and fit it into a pocket. Which is what you said.
Yeah. So for example, on this, I do something on lead vocals a lot, to where I'm sending I kind of have two delay methods. I'm either creating an echo or a throw delay, something happening later in time after being triggered, or I'm having a global delay. meaning it's just on at all times, and it's just happening, whatever the fader is sending it. And for lead vocals, what I really like to do is create a really short delay. Sometimes it's 3 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds, but I put it to each side, and I try to make it asymmetrical just so it makes your ear focus on something, something off. I like having mixes where there's almost an asymmetrical aspect to it within the symmetry of the whole mix, just to make
More
it more
natural, right?
Yeah, especially like with pianos. When I get to that song later by Karina's, that'll be a perfect example of
Yeah,
that.
I remember we talked about that.
I tilt it, but I put it there on purpose. But I do it with a delay.
So it's almost like what he's saying is, you want to fill the frequencies, you just don't want them to be filled with the same thing, right?
Yeah. In this aspect with the lead vocal, I do it because it creates tension and it ties the center source to the sides, and it almost creates a lift, because it's almost like a tent with 2 strings attached to the sides, and this delay is so subtle. Like even the send is -17, the return is -19. I'm compressing it. I'm putting a reverb in it to push it even further towards the back, but I'm compressing it to kind of compact it a little, just to make sure that when you hear it, like you hear it. But at the same time, I duck it so low to where you would only hear it if I took it away, and it creates this tension. It makes a bigger vocal to me. And I guess if you were to call something like a trick, then I guess that could be like a vocal trick. To super short delays in stereo from a mono source will do some things to your vocal, and you can play with it different ways to get it to sit in different pockets. And that to me is what compression is really about. It's like water or Play-Doh, meaning the source, the sound, to where you can fold it and mold it to fit in different spaces. And that's kind of how I look at it. And I use it to tame too, but like that's one use of compression for me, to tame stuff. Another use is to really sculpt with it. And I would say I use compression to sculpt more than I ever do to tame.